Welcome back to the COS Business Podcast. My name is Andrew Hasley, and I am the host of the show. I've noticed that every time I start the show, I do this gesture. I move the mic a little bit. Like every time I'm saying that first sentence. Today, I'm sitting here with Lauren Hug with HugSpeak. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
So my business has transformed a lot over the years, but I do a lot of community engagement and what I like to say, multi-way communication strategy. So how do you get people to be involved and participate in your brand or in your business? And really the end game these days is to get your consumers, your customers, your fans to talk about your business themselves voluntarily. So a lot of building programs for incentivizing that or in encouraging that or training people to do that. And because word of mouth is always the best way to get new business.
Yes.
And now we can amplify it through digital spaces.
Yeah, word of mouth has to start somewhere. And like I love when you ask people like how they get business and the thing they say is word of mouth. Well, how did you get that word of mouth? How did that happen?
Well, and it comes down to relationships always, but you can just amplify that relationship building by encouraging people to share when they meet somebody or when they work with you or whatever. And so getting that out into the world in like a way that can be clicked, liked, shared, amplified is kind of what I do. Kind
of letting them know everything they need to know without having to think about it, kind of, I think, just... I had a thought there, but oh well. All right, so I'll roll the intro music and we'll dive into that, and dive into your business a little more and just figure out who you are and what you do. All right. This is a show where we have real conversations with entrepreneurs and business owners who are mostly in Colorado Springs doing things in the community of Colorado Springs.
But like,
for sure.
Do you have a radio background? Because I'm listening to you, I'm like, you sound like a radio host. It's awesome.
That's great. I like hearing that. Not really. I did run a podcast in 2017 where I had like 80 episodes. This show has about 80 episodes. So that's about 160 episodes, 170
that's a lot.
Conversations. So that's training wheels. That's experience. So I think that's developed my ability, or maybe I just have a natural knack for having a radio voice. I haven't been told that before, so I appreciate that.
For sure.
I'm gonna turn this monitor around so I can make sure that it's going.
Okay.
That's one reason why I need an intern. Because while I'm talking to a guest, half the time I'm paranoid if everything's still running right.
And then you're thinking it on multiple levels, right?
Yeah, and I shouldn't be. I want to be fully focused in the conversation, and I do that for the most part. But in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, got to check to make sure that's still going.
I do a lot of qualitative research too. I'm terrible about talking about business, but like same thing. Like if the recorder isn't recording, I'm always like, wait a minute, am I capturing or should I be taking more detailed notes? Like,
Yeah. Notes are tricky for me. Like I'm not good at taking notes. That's probably why I never went to college.
Actually, you're just a front runner of a trend. I think lots of people are not going to go to college in the future.
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel that. And like we were talking a little bit before recording about, you said the phrase gig economy. And the way that is going is like an up curve of people doing their own thing. Also, the way social media and digital has allowed that to happen. You could not build a business at 4 a.m. in the 90s.
This is why I'm like, anytime we can talk about, like anytime people are like anti-social media, I'm like, no. It has created economic power for any kind of, I don't even use the word freelancer, but consultants or things like that you could not have built these businesses 10 years ago the way you can now.
Yeah, for sure. And it's amazing. I like it. And, there's pros and cons to social media, but it is an evolution forward, I do believe.
Yeah.
And, there's obviously some kinks. It's what, like 15 years old? So,
yeah. Exactly.
So it can't even buy alcohol yet. So,
exactly.
So it definitely has some little maturing to do. The internet as a whole, I think, has finally reached full maturity, but social media is still like its baby, kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
In that metaphor, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what is your business? What do you do? Or we already discussed that a little bit at the beginning. So let's dive into more about the origin story about why you started your business.
That's a great question. I don't know that I've ever been asked that before.
Okay.
I started the business. I mean, it actually sort of came about by accident. I have this weird eclectic background where I had started my career in market research and strategy for actually consulting with Fortune 500s at a company.
Nice.
And I also have 2 law degrees. So I was sort of torn between this business consulting thing that I loved, but also law. And I spent a couple years practicing criminal defense as well. But I had my first kid, and I didn't like the kind of the pace of the work that I was doing. So I thought I was going to do stay-at-home mom thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't do it. I got bored really fast. Mm-hmm. So I started taking on sort of like side projects with former clients of mine and with different
former clients at the
previous company, like really small ones, right? Like the company would take on enormous projects, and if they'd had like a really small thing that the other company wouldn't have done, you could do a small version of it. And then things like I helped coach speech and debate at a local school, and then some of the parents would ask me to do additional things like coaching their kids in various ways or helping their sales team. And so I just sort of built a business without even knowing I was building a business, doing various things. And then I became purposeful about it in 2012 and was like, okay, I'm going to move. I'm not going to have the same network that I've had for years because I had grown up, gone to high school, college in the same town, law school in the same town. And so then I was like, okay, I'm going to start a business. What's my business going to be? And what I really wanted to do is high-level qualitative research, which I just think is so important to make actionable decisions.
What does that mean, high-level qualitative research?
So like focus groups and integrated. So you do surveys, you have quantitative, you have qualitative. Qualitative being more like anecdotal. You can't say statistically this many people said the thing, but you're telling people stories and you're getting like real words from people that you couldn't make up.
Experience and wisdom.
Yeah, and people say things in their own voice that are just very different from the way other people would say things. And so the only way that was going to happen, those decisions are made kind of in the C-suite. And I didn't know anybody in the C-suite in the town that I was moving to here in Colorado Springs.
I'm not familiar with that term.
Corporate, like the corporate, like CEO, COO, that kind of thing, right? Like with big businesses. And so I was like, well, the way
you had no connections to them.
None. Like I didn't know a single human being.
But you did have
life.
connections to those kinds, the C-suite in Austin.
Yeah, because I've been there for a long time. Yes. And so I was like, how am I gonna? I didn't know a single human being when I moved here. Like not at all. Just moved because there's mountains and it's pretty. And
that was my story too, as well. As not knowing anyone and starting my business. Hit the ground starting my business.
And I love that, right? Like that's one of the things I love about this community is that people can do that. I feel like it's incredibly welcoming. But I was like, I'm gonna have to be purposeful in a way that I haven't been before because I don't have those relationships. And what is something people aren't gonna greenlight tens of thousands of dollars of research without knowing the company, the person, etc. So how can I get to know these people? And I fell back on presentation coaching and consulting because I've done that for years. I've taught people how to public speak, how to formulate presentations. And I was like, that's an actual tangible thing that a lot of executives need. Yeah. Especially with conferences and all that stuff. So I started with that. That's really what I was putting out there as my business at the beginning. And then I'd have these conversations with people and be like, well, I can help you figure out like what your customers think or what your employees think. And I have this background. So over time I built that. And in the meantime, the digital world was exploding. And seeing the qualitative piece of like, you always want information from your customers. That's important for businesses. But they're out there telling you all about themselves all day long on social media now. Yeah. So instead of having to create artificial conditions where you bring people into a room and you ask them questions or something like that, you can just ask them in real time on their own feeds, or there are ways to use the digital spaces to really conduct interesting customer research or stakeholder research. The word customer is probably too narrow. And so how do we use that? And then what does it mean about how do you change marketing and your messaging? Because all this was happening all at the same time. So I was using these traditional methods that I'd learned pre-digital media. And then trying to figure out how to use them in a new emerging space. And then that's how I became known for doing a lot of digital consulting because I was kind of like a front. I mean, in Austin, everybody was doing it. It wasn't quite done here yet. Now there's lots of people in the space, but when I first got here, there wasn't as much.
How big is Austin?
Austin, God, what are we at? Austin is, I don't even know how big it is at this point. I mean, it doubled in like,
it's growing, yeah.
Yeah, I went back for a wedding like 2 years ago and I barely recognized it. The skyline has, I think, almost 3 times as many skyscrapers as it had when I left. So it's huge. Mm-hmm. And so it was just a different environment. And I mean, it's not something I ever planned, but I'm a big believer in like kind of organic growth, like strategy. Yes, strategy is extremely important, but you can't be like tied down to it because the world changes so rapidly these days.
Yeah, strategy has to be an evolving thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And that, so I mean that like all these skills sort of come together and combine. And so I approach every project with kind of like okay, here's a thing I've done before that's kind of like what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Here's what you're facing. Here's a novel for you way of approaching this situation or this solution. So it works for some clients. Some clients love it. They're like, yes, we want completely innovative, us specific types of approaches. And then others are like, no, we need something that's a lot more established and that we know how to measure. And so it's just that it's kind of that whole notion of I love having relationships in the community because projects that aren't right fit for me, I can hand off to somebody or refer to another consultant who will do it in a way that works for that organization. And so that whole, I don't really feel the concept of competition.
Yes, it's an abundance mindset. There's a lot of work out there and more than enough for you to get by.
Totally.
To not just get by, but even thrive,
And it's like, it's stress-free in a lot of ways because you're not having to hang on to things or try to make things fit that don't fit. Mm-hmm. Because I know that my approach is not going to work for everybody.
You never try to sell the unsellable, never try to convince people, like it's better to let the people who don't need convincing find you, is what I've noticed.
And that's what I think the digital world has done is like, that's it's flipped, I think, traditional marketing on its head because the whole concept was you go out and try to convince people instead of just show your stuff and the people who want what you're doing are going to find you.
Yeah.
Or build relationships that connect you to those
do
people.
Both, So it's like, you're building those relationships, but what's cool is like you can stay relevant in people's minds because of social media. Yeah. And then when you're staying relevant in people's minds, as soon as someone brings up something that has related to you, they can be like, hey, I know someone, like you come top of mind marketing.
And that is also relationship marketing in a lot of ways. And that
because they have to know, like, and trust you to be able to refer you.
Right. Because people don't arbitrarily refer people. They refer people they like. Yeah. They refer people who did a good job for them. They refer people they trust.
Yes.
And that is, I jokingly say when I build digital strategies that I'm really good at saying nothing for a long time because you need them to be paying attention to you when you say something important. And not nothing, I shouldn't say it like that, but like you do have to be present, and social media is a content monster and it requires constant feeding.
Yes.
And most organizations, legacy organizations that were built 10 years ago or so aren't structured to have somebody who's feeding that monster on a regular basis.
And they're going to get left behind.
Or they're going to adapt. Yeah. They're going to adapt, right?
Or they're going to adapt. If they don't, they're going to get left behind.
But it's a transition period, and there's you can see these growing pains and these conversations happening
because competition is real. I mean, I don't look at it that way, but it is real. So if you have all these other companies that are doing this and they're getting all the customers, your company's not going to be getting that. Right. Like it's different on a one-on-one basis, but when like everyone else is doing it and you're not, your business is gonna shrivel.
Yeah, and you can see, and I've worked with different organizations or businesses where you can see the frustration of like, but we really are the best at this, and it's like, but nobody knows that because you've doubled down on being really great in this field, but you haven't communicated that yet, and it's
people are finding other people before they find you.
Exactly. Yeah, and then they build a relationship with those people, and then that's their guy, and they're going to keep using that guy. And so it's this, I think it's a tough time for, I don't want to say older, but like, I guess that's really the right word, older businesses to figure out how to be part of this newer economy that is very much based on communication, either through social media posts or video or audio or exactly what we're doing here. And I mean, it's a challenge for me because I am not a video person. And I know it, and I'm constantly telling clients, you need more video,
I'm a video guy.
So there you go. Now I know a guy.
Yeah.
And so but it's really important because algorithms prioritize video over other types of content on social networks. But it's not just any video. Like, it still has to be watchable video.
Yeah. Yes, it definitely has to be watchable, and the idea of good is subjective.
Absolutely.
Like there's certain places for certain types of video content, but for a lot of businesses, all they need to do, like at least a lot of small businesses, maybe if you're a corporation, get some better representation, but a lot of small businesses, all you need to do is pull out your phone.
I say this all the time. I'm going to start sending them to you. Like, that's it. Like, when you are your business, and a lot of small businesses really are, it's the owner's passion, and you're doing everything as the owner, right? All you have to do is be authentic and transparent, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Because honestly, what the social media networks are trying to do is they're trying to fuse. They want the sponsored content and the produced content to not jump out as different from the friend and network created content. And so we're reaching this time frame where like shaky handheld phone camera, like video footage is actually compelling in a lot of ways. It feels more real than something that's produced.
I've seen a credit card company, they had an ad, and it was literally just like a 6-second video, and there's like, it was a cup, and it was like someone like doing this with the card, and it was just like, you would think, I guess traditionally, like, what the hell are they doing? But what it did is it pulls your attention away from the other feed, because it kind of pops out. It was like, this is different, this is weird, and so you kind of notice it. And maybe if it comes around a third or fourth time, then you actually like really notice it. And like, I'm talking about it right now. I mean,
memorable is important because there's so much stuff coming at us all the time now that we naturally filter all sorts of things out.
Oh yeah, our BS meters are more sensitive than ever now.
That's why I'm always telling clients that, like, what jumps out are things that are totally different, like, and maybe really random and odd.
Yeah.
Or friends and family. And we pay attention to the people that we already know and trust. And when we hear them say, this is important, or I had this experience or whatever, that's when we start paying attention. There's a huge difference between an ad from a restaurant about their amazing food and your friend telling you, oh my gosh, you've got to go eat this thing. I've never had anything this good. And you're totally putting that on your list of things to do next weekend. And that's kind of where we're at, where all this content's out there in the world. So what is it that's cutting through the clutter?
Yeah. And that's basically what you help do, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So what was, you said you had to become more purposeful with your business when you started it. What was that purpose? What is the essence of your company that makes you unique?
It's a hard question because it's evolved over time. And I think, honestly, the essence of my company is that I like solving problems. I like seeking solutions. I like doing new and innovative things. But I'm very community-centric. Like, I honestly, like, it sounds so cliche, but I want the world to be better than it is. And I want my kids to grow up in a world that's more inclusive, more like that abundance mindset instead of scarcity. I genuinely believe that we are now at a time in human history when we can all thrive.
Yes.
And we no longer have to operate in ways where my winning means you losing. I don't think we have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
But there's a mindset shift that has to happen across society for that to be truly attainable for everybody.
Yeah, and it's happening, across the board, I think, with people realizing that, from people who are losing, I guess, realizing that they can win, and then, people who are winning realizing that they don't need to, be absorbing everything. And that goes back to the gig economy kind of thing we were talking about, and also the corporation thing that we were talking about. Like I was saying, like, if you have 100 people, bringing in clients in their own businesses, in your corporation, like, one of them doing that is not going to affect you at all. But when you have 100 or 1,000 of them doing that, that's going to affect your business. Either you got to adapt, but I also think that there's no adapting to that in a way for bigger corporations. I think there's a massive decentralization of everything going on, and I think these bigger corporations, the idea, the way they are, is going to change. Like, maybe it's not going to die, but maybe it's going to change a lot. Maybe it's going to be more of like those 100 people work for themselves in your company. I don't know. Like,
no, and it's going to have to, because the world moving forward with different kinds of technology and things like that. And if we think about it, corporations, I mean, I'm trying to remember my legal history now, but like they rose because of things like shipping charters and factories.
They were necessary. I mean, in a lot of ways.
And they were new.
Yeah.
They were new ways of solving problems for human existence.
It was an advancement from before. It's just cool. I love progress.
Yeah, and it will evolve and change. And I think we have the ability now to do things more collaboratively than we did historically.
Yeah.
We did, at times have needed
that was collaborating,
Yeah, right. Right. It was a different kind of, it was a whole different way of collaborating than what came before. And now we have new ways of being able to do that. And so I think it's an exciting time because we have, each individual now has the ability to contribute in a way that is meaningful to them. And we have the ability to choose different ways of being. We don't all have to have the same kind of house or the same kind of way of getting about or anything like that. We have options, and I think that's amazing. But it's also a little scary because if you have so many options, what's the right answer?
Yeah.
And most of us have been raised to think that there's a right answer to things. And then there's this cognitive dissonance of, I don't know how to choose out of all the choices I have.
Yeah, for sure.
And how do I know that I'm doing a good job? How do I know that I'm successful if my measure of success is different than your measure of success? And that's, I think we have all these this whole collection of voices now that we didn't have before.
That's the emergence that I'm seeing of coaches. Helping people, with realizing what their success looks like or, the way they measure it. Because I know one thing that coaches do is help people break down barriers, help them eliminate a lot of the limiting beliefs that we have. And that's a, trendy word, I guess, limiting beliefs, or trendy phrase,
It needs to be more trendy.
Yeah, exactly. At least it's trendy in my world. Yeah. I'm sure there's probably a lot of people who've never heard that.
Right.
And, I know my mentors and my coaches worked on that with me, and it helped me out tremendously. And I think that's what is happening too with, coaches teaching people this stuff that's fueling the gig economy even more. And it's also the need, the chicken or the egg, which came first. They're both thriving each other,
Right.
And I think that's why we see an emergence of coaches right now, because there's a need for it.
I think that's a great observation because before these pathways were determined, right? Like the way that you were going, at least the way that I grew up, the way that you knew what you were supposed to do is you went to school, you got good grades, you went to a good college, you went to a good grad school, right? Then you went and worked for somebody else and you climbed that ladder and you knew you were successful.
And that was success.
Right. And I personally, I was just like, this does not work for me, but I didn't know anybody who did it differently. And I was like, I'm supposed to go this way, but I don't think this is the way I want to go.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't really know where to go. So what am I going to do? And it was all trial and error for me. I didn't have any access to a coach or anything like that. I don't even know that I would have known how to find one if I decided I needed one.
And then there's also a big stigma around life coaches for a while. There probably still is, by that I mean a stigma of kind of woo-woo. Yeah.
I love that word.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm going to roll these cameras again. These cameras shut off every 30 minutes. But if I run them through my computer, they're just continuously on until the battery dies. So, yeah, it's actually an interesting, story behind why they shut off at 30 minutes. It's literally because of a tax in a European tax. No. Yeah. Because if it's more than 30 minutes, it's a video camera, not a photo camera.
So it has to be sold as something different.
It's got to be sold as something different, which raises the price. So for Canon and other companies to lower the barrier of entry for quality video, they had to market it as a photo, kind of. Yeah, it's hilarious.
I had to study when I did a master's of law in London, and I had to study English cases. And there's a case about Jaffa cakes. I don't even know if I'm saying it right. Jaffa cakes, yeah. And the question is whether they're cookies or biscuits, because depending on which one they were, they are subject to a different kind of taxation.
Well, in London, a biscuit is a cookie.
No, it's like biscuits. It's like this whole complicated. Cookies more like a muffin or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was based on tax, because if it was this thing, it was taxed this way, and it was that way, it was taxed that way. So it's
it's weird, and that's why I think a lot of the decentralization that's going on is going to eliminate ridiculous problems like that. That's a problem that should not be happening.
Well, categorization of things that that defy categorization is a problem in our world.
We need to have a category for that.
Right. And that's, I mean, like what we were talking about before, that what do I do? Today I do this thing, tomorrow I do that thing. I don't fit a category. When I was a lawyer, Mm-hmm. That was a category. People understood what that was. Or when I was like a strategist.
You were a lawyer?
Yeah. So I did practice for a while.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah.
Nice. I know you talked about criminal, you studied crime?
Criminal law, yeah.
Criminal law, okay, yeah. And that's got to be interesting. That leads to your podcast too. That you're doing, and
eventually, yes.
Yes.
the future podcast.
Yeah, you guys are building it right now.
We have done all the research on the actual story that we're looking into, and now we're just figuring out how we're going to deliver that content. So like being a writer, it's much more comfortable to me to write and to write a book.
What's cool is you could, since you're a writer, you could have the conversation around the research, take the podcast episode and turn it into a blog or an article.
Thinking on the same lines.
Okay,
that's kind of what I'm thinking.
That would be instead of trying to write the entire episode,
right.
Do the episode and then write something for the episode.
I think that's exactly where we're going. Because that, to me, I mean, the last book that I wrote was very much written that way. It was things that either lectures I'd given or seminars I'd given, and I had video of it and went back and then put it into book form. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what we're likely to do. But it's a whole new arena though for me to step into a podcast area.
Yeah. It's an arena that I've been following since 2012 vaguely.
Yeah.
So I kind of was in there a little early. I wish I would have started the podcast then. It's like getting in on Bitcoin in 2012.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So I didn't start a podcast until 2015, 16, and they were just small little podcasts, did a few episodes and just playing around with a friend essentially, and that's kind of allowed me to understand the medium, I guess you could say, and have a good understanding of it. And then doing a podcast before that was actually, this one's in person only, that one was Zoom only. Because I was talking to people across the world, I couldn't have in person only. Because it was a hip hop podcast.
That's so
and
cool.
I talked to hip hop artists all the way across the world, no matter where they were. I was talking to people who basically just started a week ago, and I was talking to people who were making 5 figures a month from their music, solely. And I was like, this is cool. And some of the guests I had on the show are doing really well right now, because this was 2017. 4 years later, some of those guests had developed more into their career.
Yes.
So that's exciting. I've built a very close relationship with my first guest on that show, actually. I wouldn't say very close, a good relationship.
Sure.
We've never even met in person before, so it's really cool. They actually really inspired me to start my video production company, because they run one out in LA, and they do some really pretty cool work out there with video. They do music videos mainly, and I'm doing some music videos right now too.
That's so cool. Local artists?
Local artists, yes. It's one artist that I'm working with, and I'm doing 3 music videos for him. Shakur the Bag, Shakur. It's like Tupac Shakur, because his middle name is Shakur. And that's the artist, and we're actually about to release the second music video. I don't know when we're gonna release it, but yeah, we're working on that one. That's exciting, and it's actually funny. It was a referral. They reached out to me from someone who works at the same place that Bonnie works at.
Oh, cool.
I don't know if he still works there, but I know he might actually. But
yeah.
And Bonnie is who referred you to this show.
We should say Bonnie Simon.
Yes. I like to plug where I can.
Yeah. Totally.
Like to not name drop, but you ever been around someone having a meeting and they're like, yeah, I went to a baseball game with this person, been
yes.
This person is just okay.
No, I try to explain that to clients before, that it's not about name dropping, it's about promoting the other person, mm-hmm, right?
Exactly.
It's not about who I know.
And that's
it's
what
about,
I was
let
saying.
me tell you about them. Sorry. Oh no, go ahead.
That's what I was getting at too. The weird feeling I was getting when that person, that's the difference of name dropping and plugging, is this person was trying to leverage other people's names for his own clout. And when I do that, and when I just did that, it was to plug them.
Right.
It had nothing to do with me.
Right. No, I think and it's a subtle shift, but it's all about purpose and intent. Because I used to hate, when I was in law school and I had to go to these networking things, I hated it. I was like, I don't want to go talk about myself for however long. I don't want to do it. It doesn't interest me. I want to know about other people. And then when I suddenly realized, I can just connect people. I can learn about them and understand where they're coming from, and then be like, you need to meet so-and-so. I was like, this is great. I love this.
It feels good, yeah.
I never have to talk about myself. And so when I get asked sometimes to talk about myself, I sort of freeze up a lot of times when I'm on panels or when I'm
on a podcast.
Like a podcast, right? Because I'm like, well, which of the things?
You're doing great, by the way.
Thank you. Let me I'll tell you how amazing and wonderful I am. No, it's just not like that's not natural for me, but I would love to talk about these. I get to work with amazing, brilliant, talented people who are doing good things for the world, and I love talking about the things that they do. So that was a huge shift for me. But yeah, like I talk to businesses a lot of times that don't want to talk about the good that they're doing because like it's bragging. We don't do it because we want attention. We're doing it because it's important to do. And like, but in this world, people are making decisions about what businesses they're going to support based on the good that you're doing in the world. So tell that story. And you don't have to make it about you. Make it about whoever you helped or make it about whoever you hired or whatever it is. But the more that we can tell those connecting stories, I think that's how we come together as a community and we learn things about people, businesses, et cetera. So, I mean, that's why I like the world that we live in now, that ability to connect beyond, to be able to do a podcast with people around the world.
Yeah, that was amazing. I thought that was so cool because sometimes I was doing like a few episodes a day. I would like release them throughout the week. But I would be in London at 10 a.m., in LA at 1 p.m., and then in Kentucky, Yeah, it was really cool, and I thought that was like, yeah, same feeling, and like this is amazing. And like when I first started, it's a funny story too. The London guest that I had on the first time I had him on, because I had him on again like later down the line. The first time I had him on, I was doing it over like a phone call. I wasn't doing it with video yet, and I'd never done international calls before. I literally got hit with like a $60 phone bill tacked on top of my phone bill. Like,
oh no!
I had no idea. I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
Like we were talking. I texted him. I was like, "Did you get charged a bunch of money too?" I'm sorry if you did. I don't think he did though.
Right, because you initiated it.
Yeah. So I was like, "Yeah, that was crazy."
But I mean, when you think about how far technology has come from that time, like now live streaming is very much part of our everyday lives. But when it wasn't that long ago that it was totally new.
Yeah, you couldn't even do it, that long ago.
You couldn't do it. And then when it first came out on, I think it was Periscope on Twitter, that was doing it, and people were showing the insides of their refrigerators. Like, because what else are you going to do with live streaming? Yeah. None of us know how to use it yet. So what random things are we going to do with it? Because it's brand new technology.
Yeah, for sure.
And I love that like evolution of how we've been able to connect. When I was studying in London, it was in 2002, 2003, and I just remember being like, I can play spades with my friends in America over like Yahoo funny. Or something, right? Like I don't even know now, but I got to stay in touch with people in a way that I wouldn't have been able to do even 5 years earlier. So it's just,
and that's something like, this is kind of like a side note, but like with kids in gaming, gaming has become a worldwide community, and you can have your best friend live in like Kenya,
Yeah, totally. This is something I end up talking a lot because a lot of people haven't spent as much time in the digital realm, right? So I end up talking to parents and teens or parents of teens a lot about those kinds of things, and they'll say sometimes parents will say things like, "Well, my kid doesn't have any real friends." And because his friends are gamer friends across the world and that they haven't met in person. And I'm like, we're having to redefine what is real. Yeah. I used to say real world and digital world. And now I say digital and physical because the digital world is very real. It's real. It's just a different kind of real.
There's a couple who got married in GTA 5.
No way.
Yeah. In the game.
And that's the stuff that we have to start having very open minds about because it's going to be just organic to kids. Like they don't get what we're talking about when we're like, that's not real. Like, of course it's real.
Yeah.
And so we have to be more aware of the fact that it has expanded our horizon, just the same way that travel made it possible for somebody to move across the continent and marry somebody else, which you couldn't have done if trains didn't exist or planes didn't exist or whatever. This is just another way of connecting as humans.
It's travel.
It is. It's virtual travel, but with real connection.
I'm actually probably too excited than I should be for VR, because it's probably going to be very changing of the whole landscape of the whole world. Like VR's here, but it's not really here yet. Like it's not. I can't name 5 people who I know play VR on a regular basis. Right. So once that happens, though, it's game on, literally.
It is. It's an amazing, like, it has changed everything. It will change even more. Even things like filters, right? Like, how are filters any different than putting makeup on?
Exactly.
Like, what? I mean, if I can look like a kitty cat when I'm talking to people on video, why wouldn't I? If I want to.
Did you see the lawyer?
Yeah, that's hilarious. I'm like,
I'm ready to go forward with this conversation as a cat.
I am not a cat.
Okay, lawyer, you're not a cat. We believe you.
So I think, having been in many legal proceedings in my lifetime, that they are very much improved by everybody being cat faces.
Yeah,
So,
no, for sure. And that's the thing, like with the cat faces, that's makeup, but like VR will take that to a next level.
Oh yeah, a whole
different. Like you get to choose everything, not just the augmentation of what you look like, but the entire
your environment, all the things you're interacting. Yeah, it's I mean.
I'm excited about it, to be honest. Really
I think you should be. I think that's exciting stuff, but people get very scared about it.
Yes.
Because it's different.
People were scared about trains when they first came out. They thought they were, like, the speed was going to, like, kill you.
Yes. I don't know if you watched the Social Dilemma
I have.
documentary, right? So everybody...
There's pieces I agree with it, and, there's a lot of pieces I think they kind of spun it.
If you want to ignore all the amazing things that have come from social media and only focus on the negative, okay.
Yeah.
But one of them used the example of bicycles, right? Like, a bicycle's a tool and nobody, I think what he said was a bicycle's a tool and nobody had any problem with bicycle. I'm like, I remember watching it thinking, I guarantee people had a problem with bicycle.
Yeah.
And looked it up, and surely they did. It was corrupting women, and like youth could transport themselves, like a whole bunch of stuff.
It was corrupting women, is what they...
Yeah, because women started wearing split skirts. I mean, all this stuff, right? Like, it was, I mean...
There was a lot of that going on back then.
And so, no, it's not every advancement in technology, everything that's different has come with a whole lot of hand-wringing and fear about, what's this going to mean for all of us? And because we don't know the answer, there's no way of knowing exactly what it's going to mean. But it usually means good things in the long run. Like,
I had a cool application for VR that I thought of just yesterday, I think. And it's basically, I mean, I'm sure it'll be default, and it's just an idea, and I'm sure thousands of other people will come up with it. But it's basically the Notes app inside your VR headset. But imagine having like a Notes app that's everywhere, and you can like work on stuff over here and then write stuff over here. Yeah. You could whiteboard, you could flow chart, you could pull up bubbles, you could pull up graphics, like that's awesome. I feel like that the reason I wanted that and saw a use for that is because I was like, I could plan things out a lot more effectively if I had that software, like not constricted to a phone, not constricted to a square or a piece of paper and a pen, like just free, like I think it would allow me to be able to execute strategies or at least plan things a lot better, more efficiently. Like there's a lot of openness for that, at least with the way my mind works, because I'm everywhere.
Well, I think those kinds of tools are there. I mean, when you have a tool, you can do something different than you could do before you had the tool. And that is, like, I've been looking at mapping relationships, right? And I've been looking at relationship mapping software, and I haven't found one that I love. I see a couple that I like, but it makes a difference when I can represent it this way versus this way or whatever it is. We are limited in the ways that we can communicate. I mean, just the difference between working on, say, a long form podcast and writing a story for a newspaper that's much more constrained.
Yes.
And the choices you have to make about what you leave out or how you say it, or when you're writing, you have to be very clear about context, and you have to, because it can be interpreted so many different ways. But when you've got facial expressions included and you've got sound and all this other stuff, like you can do this and you can do this. And the more that we have options, again, the more we can do. And it's fascinating to me when these things come about. But I would love that. I want to paint walls in my house on whiteboard paint because I just want to cover.
That would be a really cool idea. Even maybe shape it to where it's like circle.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Kind of not like a full circle, but like an oval kind of fill in, so that way like there's no hard stops in the walls. That way you can continue. Yeah, you can continue continuity. Yeah, you can continue through without having like a break. Yeah, and that would be cool.
We have all these artificial things because of the world that existed. So I mean, even the way that we build buildings, because you can manufacture boards as rectangles, and that's why we build rectangular structures. But now that we can 3D print, we can build more organic structures, and
like those Mars buildings that they're building.
So cool.
Have you seen them? They're like vase shaped, and they're like really efficient. Like
I like anything that's like a completely different structure than we've had before.
Yeah. And have you been to the tiny house festivals?
I haven't. I know about them. I haven't been to them yet. Yeah.
That's actually the guy who runs it. I'm pretty sure he's gonna be working with me on this podcast.
Cool.
So yeah.
Yeah,
we're meeting tomorrow, actually.
Totally different way of building, a totally different way of living. I mean, now it's kind of norm. People know it and they expect it. But like what happens when we start living in circles or we start living in more organic, natural structures? Like there's so many things about we were limited in what we could produce. And now we have different ways of producing. Yes. My kid was just showing me a video the other day about like not 3D, food printing. Like essentially creating like these flavors that can then be mixed the same way that colors can be mixed for like visual printing.
Or like clones or...
Yeah, and then like...
Not clones, but...
Perfume. Yeah. And if you take these essences and you mix them in a certain way, you can print any flavor. And you can, once you have the transportable mechanism of whatever it is, like I think it was almost like jelly bean type consistency. You just print these things in and like...
That's what Star Trek was getting at.
Like that to me is fast. I tell my kids all the time, like, you don't even understand. Like this stuff was science fiction when I was a kid.
Yeah, smartphones were science fiction. Smartwatches were science fiction.
Push a button and I can talk to you. I don't even have to push the button anymore. You just tell the phone to call you. Like
exactly. You can tell it, yeah.
And for them, this is just their world. And so they think I'm being ridiculous when I tell them that.
Okay, boomer.
All right, I'm not a boomer. But yes. And just to see how differently, because I'll ask them questions about things like, what is it like to grow up with social media? And they're like, what are you talking about? That's my world. And so anytime I'm talking to parents about talking to kids, it's like the things we're concerned about because it didn't exist, they're not concerned about because it's always existed for them.
Yes, so exactly.
They really don't know a world without it. And that's a whole, it's kind of
in a way, I'm kind of in that like borderline area. I technically kind of grew up with it, but I was in like high school and middle school. Right. I was in middle school when I had a MySpace, and high school when Facebook. So so that was huge too. Adapting to the whole like system in high school. Right.
Well, and quantifying likes is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, it changed because when I first started coaching speech and debate, my first students that team was the first year that Facebook was accessible to high school students. Okay. And so we talked a lot about how that was going to change interaction or what it meant and how to use it and what it meant for their future. And I mean, all this other stuff that like nobody was talking about back then. Cause I could see it coming, and I had these, now they're all grown-ups of course, but like kids at the time that, I could help guide through this thing. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've been interested in it for so long. And now I have kids of my own. That, I'm probably the permissible parent who's like, whatever, this is technology, go use it. Like, let's talk about it. Let's, I don't know what it's like to grow up with all this stuff. So I don't really know how to advise you.
For sure.
But let's have some conversations about I'm worried about these things. There are things I'm worried about in the digital space, but I also trust you to be reasonable and to know what's good for you too. So we have very open conversations about this stuff because I can't just be like, well, the way it was when I was a kid, what's going to be this way?
Yeah.
Their world's completely different.
Yeah, it's not going to be that way. And it never was for every generation,
No.
Every generation, it's different,
Right. And to recognize that, I think, is important because, I've had lots of conversations with my parents about, for them, college was definitely the way forward to a better life. And so it was really important to them that their kids went to college. And I'm very thankful that they made that a priority and something that they helped us do. But the kind of world that I moved into, I didn't want to do what other people wanted me to do. I wanted to have my own path.
Yeah.
And I wasn't equipped for entrepreneurial undertaking. That was just not a thing that anybody taught when I was in school, and I was a good student.
I heard that it was actually looked down on.
Yeah, like you couldn't, if you were smart, you got a good job at a good company, right? Like you went to a good graduate school. I did the things I was supposed to do, right? But they just didn't work for me, and I don't think they worked for lots of people. And so then I took that into like raising my own kids. And I remember telling my dad when my son was maybe 2 and he was fascinated by the plumber that was at the house. I was like, I don't know that my kids are ever going to go to college. And my dad was just like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And then over the years, it's become increasingly like it's expensive. It doesn't always train you for job. Like there's a whole lot of considerations.
And you can get online.
You can learn anything
online. You even if you're paying $2,000 for an online course, it's way better than a $100,000 loan.
It's so, and I'm not like, there's a time and a place for those types of educations,
yes.
But like when we think about it, universities came about because that's where the books lived. The books lived in the libraries that universities were built around.
I never thought of that. Yeah.
And then the learned people congregated where the books were. So you had these centers of learning because that's the only place you could access the learning. Well, now you can access basically all of human history and learning from your phone.
And like at first, some of these colleges were safeguarding that. They probably still are in a lot of ways. Some of their printed material that's put online. And there's the guy who started what's that Wikipedia. I was thinking I didn't want to say WikiLeaks because that's a different guy.
Different thing.
Yeah. The guy who started Wikipedia, he was young when he started it too, and like he went into a school and broke into their servers. I mean, what he did was illegal. Like he actually went into like the actual room where the servers were, and he downloaded all their like stuff that was like they were charging like $300, like a bunch of money that he thought this education should be free. He felt that way. Yeah. He thought it should be to the world. Like, and then he did that and he got busted. He got caught. He was facing some huge federal right. like criminal action, and he ultimately ended up killing himself from that. And so it's just like we lost a really precious person right there. I think on that. And then he did do something illegal. Right. I'm not saying that he didn't, but it was. I think what he did was noble too. Right.
Well, and it's based around scarcity of information. Right. Power comes from having knowledge, and in a world where everybody can access knowledge, who has power? And it's a complicated equation, but more and more we are seeing the accessibility of all sorts of learning. And if you can learn something from a YouTube video, or now my kids are learning things from TikTok, then why do you need to have access? And
TikTok is amazing at this bite-sized information.
It's incredible, the stuff that they're learning. And I mean, I'll come downstairs. My kid has an art space, and she has learned through YouTube and through TikTok and other things, all sorts of artistic, different mediums, different ways of doing stuff. Like she'll come up to me and like, I need this. Can you buy me this? And then 3 days later, she'll have produced a clay creation of like a dragon. Yeah. And through just
would not have probably even been able to have that idea or come across that if it wasn't for TikTok. Because TikTok, it throws some really cool stuff. It inspires you in a lot of ways. Is that me? Oh, that's
me. Sorry.
Is that your meter?
No, it's. Sorry about that.
No worries. I like to keep it authentic on the show too, so things like that get left in, and it's
great.
Yeah. No, it's perfectly fine. I actually love it. Someone watching this may see that about you, and they'll connect with you.
My giant messy bag where I can't find anything ever.
They'd be like, "Oh, I like her."
Yeah, totally.
And that's usually what happens, like.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And that's why I say, like, just pull out your phone for businesses. Just be authentic, be you. You'll attract the people who you want to attract, and you'll also defer the people who probably would have been pain in the ass anyway.
See, this is so amazing to be living in this time, because I was trained to be formal and perfect. And
try to get everyone,
Yes, and even public speaking, like I've changed the way that I coach it, because we were taught a format of like. You've seen every TED Talk, right?
Yeah.
But this is so much more dynamic and so much more engaging than let me show you how perfect I am.
Yeah,
I speak with my perfect voice.
I dig it. Yeah. So is there anything you'd like to promote today specifically?
I would love to talk about, I think I mentioned a little bit, I have a book called Digital Kindness, and it was designed really taking into consideration a lot of the criticisms of social media. Largely the idea that we are just the product and we're just consumers of it, when in reality I see it as a tool that we get to use however we choose to use it.
It's a gun.
So, it can be.
No, what I mean is, it's in a sense, it's the person, that
Right.
It's not the gun that shoots someone. Like.
Or a car or any, like I actually in the foreword to the book, Matthew Kaskovich, who used to be in our community here in Colorado Springs and now I think is in, I can't remember where he is right now, but he's a really forward-thinking social media type person. And he's like, a car can be driven into a building and kill a bunch of people, or it can be used to get somebody to the hospital. I can't remember exactly how he said it, but we can do whatever we want with it. And the more that we're purposeful about how we use it and recognize both like what our limitations are going to be and how we use it, but also how we choose to use it positively to connect and to move all of us forward. That's why I wrote it. And it's really just a series of considerations and questions. Like it's not here's what you have to do and here's the right way for you to do it. Because you mentioned coaching. It's much more like coaching questions about how do you want to use it? What is important to you? How are you responding to it? Because some people
How much control do we really have of it, though?
Of like the algorithms itself? Yeah. Well, I mean, we have tons, right? Yeah. Because the algorithm's based on what we give it. Yeah. So if we give it different things than what it has right now, you can game a system. I mean, look at what just happened with GameStop and the stock market, right?
Yeah,
like if
amazing.
You pay attention to the rules and then you figure out how to use the rules to your benefit. So that's all. It's available on Amazon in both print and digital. It's called Digital Kindness. And for anybody who's trying to figure out how to navigate this, I've had a lot of parents read it and say it's helped them have conversations with their kids about, and it wasn't designed for that. It's just, thinking about it in a more positive light instead of it's really scary. Yeah. And looking at the ways that it really benefits a generation coming up now with totally different access. Because I'm a huge fan of it. I think it's actually way better than what we had before. And it gives voices. We are finally hearing voices that have been marginalized for a very long time because they didn't have access to the primary channels of communication. And that means we're going to have very different solutions coming forward because we have different people at the table, and that's exciting to me. So anyway, that's the one thing I talk about.
For me too, yeah. And we'll have to make that book book of the week one of these times.
Cool. I meant to bring a copy and then I forgot. I was like,
no worries. All right, so we'll start wrapping this up. This has been the COS Business Podcast, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Thank you.
All right.